The situation is improving in many parts of the country, but some places are still grappling with rising numbers. Overall, there have been more than 56,000 cases of COVID-19 since the outbreak began. More than 3,500 people have died. Some good news in New Brunswick, which hasn't reported a new case of COVID-19 in 14 days. And today, that government says all of its 118 confirmed cases have recovered, making it the only province without an active case. But it's a different story in Quebec, which confirmed more than 1,000 new cases in the past 24 hours and 114 new deaths. Still, that province is pushing ahead with plans, despite concerns it may not be ready. Our Mike Couture takes a look at the road to reopening across the country.
It's pretty cool, though.
Imagine the frustration of a child. It's the first nice day of the year, and the playground is still off limits.
I think they miss that, getting on the swings and the monkey bars and all that kind of stuff. So that's hard, yeah.
Those won't be opened yet in Ontario, but other restrictions are being relaxed. Garden centers and nurseries can start curbside pickup on Monday, and more businesses will be allowed to reopen as long as they maintain health guidelines.
We see the trend going down, and we just want it to continue going down. We need consistency for a couple of weeks, and then we can loosen things up a little bit.
Now, other provinces are already loosening things up. Quebec will be the first to reopen elementary schools as early as May 11th. Manitoba is relaxing measures a little quicker, with some retail stores, restaurant patios, and hair salons allowed to welcome customers again as long as they maintain physical distancing. Now, Alberta is moving in that same direction, considering opening some businesses starting May 14th. In an interview on the West Block with Mercedes Stephenson, Premier Jason Kenney said the key to reopening is to keep the number of hospitalizations below what the healthcare system can handle.
My view, and that of our officials, is that we cannot eliminate the risk of the coronavirus. What we have to do is to manage the risk.
There are concerns. Part of that risk include restarting work at the Cargill meat plant in High River, Alberta, after a 2-week shutdown. It's the center of the province's largest COVID-19 outbreak. The United Food and Commercial Workers Union has launched legal action to stop the reopening amid fears it's not safe enough for employees.
There are other measures in the plant that could be helpful, like a further social distancing, which would result in probably a line speed reduction.
And the medical community is worried the entire country might be reopening too quickly.
Now, we didn't have enough testing out in the community to really get the good data, the information that we need to be able to open safely. So there is grave concern that we're hearing about opening too soon.
Provinces say they're going to continue moving forward, understanding that another spike of COVID-19 would mean they'd have to shut things down again. Mike Couture, Global News, Ottawa.
In the U.S., more than 30 states are in various stages of easing restrictions. And with warmer weather on the horizon, health officials are once again warning Americans to take precautions. As Jennifer Johnson explains, the country's top infectious disease doctor says a second round of COVID-19 is inevitable.
A massive protest in Huntington Beach, California, demanding businesses and beaches reopen. With tempers flaring, a street brawl erupted, an example of just how divided America is over returning to normal too soon. For restaurant owners in Texas, serving customers again couldn't come soon enough.
There was a time where I was losing $30,000 a day. And, it's not huge, but that's a lot of money if you're not ready for it.
White House officials are hoping businesses reopening will jumpstart America's crumbling economy. The Trump administration will now monitor how each state is doing before giving more financial aid.
We're waiting to see what the economic impact of the gradual opening up is, assessing, what that does to the demand for, say, PPP loans, these small business loans.
Members of Congress looking for answers will not hear from the nation's top infectious disease expert next week. The White House has blocked Dr. Anthony Fauci from testifying in the House, which impeached U.S. President Donald Trump, but will allow him to testify before a Senate Health Committee May 12th. Fauci has often clashed with President Trump on reopening the country too soon.
You can't just leap over things and get into a situation where you're really tempting a rebound. That's the thing I get concerned about.
So far, no state has met the federal guidelines to reopen, a decrease in COVID-19 cases for 14 days. But the economic toll of the pandemic is weighing heavily on Americans. Federal officials reporting an almost 900% surge in calls to its disaster distress national helpline.
They're faced with complete annihilation, if you will. And so being able to at least start up business again is going to relieve a tremendous amount of strain.
So I'll be going to Camp David for a working weekend.
President Trump has left the White House for the first time since late March. The president's focus now, Operation Warp Speed, pushing researchers to create a vaccine to prevent COVID-19 as quickly as possible. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
In Fort McMurray tonight, residents are seeing firsthand the damage done by floodwaters this week. An ice jam along the Athabasca River caused a sudden rise in water, forcing 13,000 people to flee their homes. Global's Brianna Karsten-Smith is in Fort McMurray as residents return. Brianna?
This is what so many front yards in downtown Fort McMurray look like right now. For the first time, residents are getting a chance to see the damage from the flooding this weekend. The damage is extensive. In one case, a resident tells me he thinks he had about 8 feet of water in his basement. Many people saying they're not even bothering to try to save anything because it is all just too waterlogged. But in one case, we spoke with a man who found a box of trinkets from his time in the military, a happy finding in a time when he needed a little bit of hope. We're hearing two main things from people on this street, mostly that they didn't have enough time to prepare. None of these homes were protected by sandbags. They say they weren't given enough warning. The second thing we're hearing is that they do not think they're going to get any help from their insurance companies. Many people could use a bit of financial help right now. This is a region so reliant on oil, and oil prices are dropping rapidly. Also, they're impacted by COVID-19. Many people laid off or have lost their jobs. And this comes at a time when people are still reeling from the Fort McMurray wildfire 4 years ago on Sunday. So this is an anniversary that is hard to mark right now. And a natural disaster, once again, Fort McMurray is cleaning up from. Brianna Karsten-Smith, Global News in Fort McMurray.
As floodwaters begin to subside around Fort McMurray, cleaning up will just be half the battle for residents. The COVID-19 pandemic remains a threat, and infectious disease experts warn this could be a risky time. As Heather Yerkes West explains, the community needs to stay cautious as it tries to pick up the pieces.
18-year-old Hannah Wolowski had planned to spend the summer isolating with her family in Fort McMurray.
I was in Kelowna for university for my first year and then came back in late March to be with my family through the pandemic.
But when water began to fill Wolowski's childhood home, those plans changed.
I'm staying with one of my really good friends, and then my parents and the dog are staying with one of their good family friends.
To have the flood on top of what's happening with the COVID is really horrifying in some ways.
Alberta health officials have put measures in place to reduce the risk of an outbreak. Evacuees have been put up in hotels and motels instead of crowded shelter spaces. But it's when the water recedes and people return to clean up that the risk of an outbreak may start to rise.
People are just gonna say, screw it, we need to get this done anyway. Or, and some people will wear masks and stuff and try and maintain their distance, but at some point, what's more important?
In 2013, when flooding ravaged southern Alberta, the community of High River rallied to help their neighbors. Social distancing wasn't a concern. This time around, anyone wanting to lend a hand will need to take precautions.
I think when you cannot maintain the physical distancing, this is where those other measures come in as an absolute critical defense.
Dr. Jenny says volunteers will need proper PPE. He also recommends people be restricted to bubble zones so that if an outbreak happens, it stays contained. And testing. Testing will be key.
Given the risk of an outbreak, we need to be sure we're in there testing people regularly, and not just people with symptoms.
The good news is there aren't many cases of COVID-19 in the region right now. Experts say it will just take vigilance to ensure it stays that way. Heather Yerkes West, Global News, Calgary.
A Royal Canadian Air Force flight safety team is in Italy tonight. They're there to investigate this week's deadly helicopter crash off the coast of Greece. The Cyclone helicopter crashed into the Mediterranean Sea on Wednesday. 6 military personnel from HMCS Fredericton were aboard the chopper when it went down during a NATO exercise. 5 of them are missing and presumed dead. The body of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra has been found. Yesterday, the crew members held a vigil to pay their respects. Any human remains that are recovered will be repatriated to Canada next week. A powerful earthquake has struck Puerto Rico. The 5.4 magnitude quake hit near the southern part of the island. It briefly knocked out power and damaged several buildings and businesses. There are no reports of any deaths. Today's earthquake comes just 5 months after the U.S. territory went through another powerful tremor, which destroyed hundreds of homes and caused millions of dollars in damage. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has made his first public appearance in nearly 3 weeks. On Friday, he cut a ribbon to mark the completion of a fertilizer factory near Pyongyang. State media video shows Kim walking, talking, and smoking during the ceremony. He hadn't been seen in public since April 11th, sparking rumors he was seriously ill or even dead. Coming up, the secret to the successful COVID-19 fight in Australia and New Zealand. The biggest shipment of personal protective equipment to come into Canada so far arrived in Montreal last night on a chartered flight from China. The shipment is believed to contain mostly protective gowns for healthcare workers. It arrived on the world's largest cargo plane, an Antonov AN-225. That plane can carry up to 250,000 kilograms of cargo. Now let's take a look at the global pandemic picture. There are more than 3.4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world. The virus has claimed over 240,000 lives. More than 65,000 of those deaths are in the U.S., followed by Italy with close to 29,000. But the U.K. is on track to overtake Italy. It added 621 deaths today, bringing its total to over 28,000. France is planning to extend its health emergency by 2 months until July 24th. Its government says relaxing measures prematurely could cause another spike in cases. All travelers to the country will also face a compulsory 2-week quarantine period. Runners, cyclists, and pedestrians crowded onto streets and paths across Spain today. It's the first time in 7 weeks that people in that country are allowed out for exercise. Spain's government has set up time slots for age groups to prevent crowds from exposing at-risk elders. This week, New Zealand and Australia also relaxed some of their lockdown measures. Both countries have been able to quickly and sharply reduce the number of COVID-19 cases and keep deaths low. Redmond Shannon takes a look at how they did it and what the rest of the world can learn.
New Zealand's proud cafe culture is back.
So stoked.
Honestly, it's so good to have a coffee.
Kiwis saw rules loosened on Tuesday after a month under one of the world's harshest lockdowns. That included the closure of almost all businesses and strict quarantine measures for anyone entering the country. The strategy paid off with a low infection rate and a very low death toll. Community transmitted cases have been all but eliminated. The country set ambitious goals for contact tracing in an effort to mirror early successes achieved in South Korea and Taiwan.
Yes, we have done that in lockdown. The goal now is to keep up that work. So we're now in the next phase of the battle and we are not done.
Australia's had a softer lockdown but has seen a similar fall-off in cases. Unlike New Zealand, restaurants were allowed to open for takeout and the iconic Bondi Beach reopened to surfers this week.
That was beautiful. It's so good to be back in the water. It's like we've been craving for it since the beach was closed.
In addition to the lockdown measures, both countries benefit from their remote location, which gave them more time to react.
If you saw your first case later than other countries, you've got more time to plan and more time to see how other countries responded and what they did right or wrong.
In fact, they started their lockdowns down under after Canada. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has been widely praised for her clarity, in contrast to the initial mixed messages in another island nation.
I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody.
Not to mention the confusion that reigns after White House briefings.
The disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute,
And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside?
Any crisis, the key to success is always being clear and decisive and unwavering. And I think that's what New Zealand showed.
Being consistent and acting fast, summed up by this warning from the WHO back in March.
Perfection is the enemy of the good when it comes to emergency management. Speed trumps perfection.
However, it could yet be years before we know who really made the best calls. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Still ahead, a princess offers some royal treats to help in the pandemic. The royal family is celebrating the 5th birthday of Princess Charlotte, daughter of Prince William and the Duchess Kate. And to mark the occasion, they've released new photos of her helping the most vulnerable in this pandemic. The images taken last month show Charlotte delivering food parcels to the elderly who live near the royals' Sandringham estate. Boris Johnson and his fiancée Carrie Simmons have named their son Wilfred Laurie Nicholas Johnson. He was born on Wednesday, and one of his middle names is a tribute to Dr. Nick Price and Dr. Nick Hart. They both treated the Prime Minister when he fell ill of COVID-19 in March. Up next, reacting by adapting, the Canadian innovations emerging from this pandemic.
I don't have anything super interesting prepared for you. I just thought that I would pop in and phone this thing in the way I phoned in my final year at Kitsilano Secondary School.
That's how actor Ryan Reynolds kicked off his commencement speech, delivered virtually to the grad class of the Vancouver high school he attended. He topped it off by having his favorite local spot deliver 385 extra large pizzas to every grad and the teachers. By the way, the BC-born actor graduated from the school in 1994. COVID-19 has shuttered so many businesses across Canada for now and for good. But sometimes when one door closes, another opens. As the pandemic spotlights the urgency for innovation, Mike Armstrong looks at how Canadians are adapting.
If they wanted to keep selling vehicles at this Alberta auction house, physical distancing meant they had to find a new way of doing it. Well, they're doing it now without people, what was once the most important thing for an auction house.
In one of our larger events, upwards of 15,000 people registered online.
I'm not bad myself. COVID-19 closures left performer Martin Kerr without anywhere to perform. Bars have shut down, festivals are being canceled, but instead of sitting at home, Kerr and his manager put out word he'd take gigs just about anywhere.
Requests started flooding in, and we've got about 20 booked already, I think, all over the city.
Disruption is occurring everywhere. Jim Carroll would normally be on a stage somewhere talking trends. He's a futurologist. Instead, he's working out of his home delivering speeches from a new studio. Carroll says COVID-19 is driving urgency to innovate.
Well, it's all about attitude. It's all about mindset. It's all about, what we are doing to try to get ready for tomorrow.
And let's go! Whether it's a BC trainer who's moved online or a new production line at a Quebec company making hand sanitizer, Canadians are innovating.
I was like, okay.
One that Carol's following is an Ontario farmer who'd normally be selling at farmers markets. Instead, in a matter of days, he created a virtual market and distribution system for himself and other producers.
I'm running my farm. Like, I'm growing food. I'm growing even more food right now than I had planned to this year.
Carroll says what innovators are doing is adapting instead of sitting back, and that this era will leave a legacy.
5 or 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this and go, like, that was really a massive breeding ground for innovation and creativity that was simply unparalleled.
Carroll may make a living predicting trends and where things are headed, but he says right now in the present, he's having trouble believing how quickly things are moving. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with this life-sized game of Monopoly, chalking up fun in Edmonton. It's the work of 5 neighbors hoping to bring people together outside while staying apart. Good night.